I'm Richard Lowe, Safer Farms Ambassador. We're in the deep south, just outside Clinton, catching up with Andrew Morrison. You're a busy man, you've got your farm of course to keep you busy. What else are you involved in?
Yeah, primarily a farmer, and that's what I always sort of wanted to be, and that's what I'll put my main focus in. But over time you get invited to do different things, so I'm a director on Balance Agri-Nutrients, New Zealand Beef and Lamb, New Zealand Meat Board, Ovis Management Limited, and RONS, Wool Research Organisation in New Zealand.
Yes, you're a busy man, Andrew. You've got 2 properties. Tell us about those.
Yeah, well, I live down just outside of Gorgon, 150 hectares down there, so Lisa and myself, we farm that. I've got 2 staff members on this place. Tim here, the manager, he's been with us 10 years, does a great job, and another staff member.
Andrew, big properties, big business. Why is safety important to you personally?
We really value the people we work with. So, I mean, I value Tim here, so I want to protect the people that we're working with, basically.
So, Andrew, how have you changed your approach to health and safety on farm?
Well, I think what we realised is we had to include staff in this. So we worked pretty closely with Tim because we had to get buy-in from him. So we worked through all our policies using Tim, and we had a staff member at the time, so just including them as much as possible.
I suppose identifying those risks and managing them, that's a starting point, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and Tim was quite reticent over here, as a lot of us were, to go down this health and safety process, and so then just formalising it, that's what we were struggling with, just the process of formalising it, because I fundamentally believe that farmers had all this stuff in their heads and were doing it, but the formalising the process. So what we did is here we got Lisa, my wife, and Tim, and myself and one of the neighbours, and we jumped in the truck and we went around together and identified the hazards, and we found that was really brilliant because a whole lot of different sets of eyes looking at the problems. So we just took highlighter pens with us, and we identified these hazards as we went. We took the map with us. Some of the stuff we found, like, is you just think, oh, business as usual. We forgot about the power wires through the place. So we could do aerial fertiliser spreading here, so we identified all those. And then we identified some of the tracks here too are actually quite hazardous. If guys aren't familiar with them, there's quite steep terrain here. So we just took the highlighter pens and marked all that stuff up. So when you bring in young guys or contractors onto the property, what we think is business as usual or normal stuff, that could be a hazard. So that was the brilliance of bringing Lisa and the neighbour in. It's a real learning curve for us, and we'd never want to portray that we've actually got this right. We're still working on this, but we grabbed one of the neighbours' maps, dairy farmer down home, and it was actually brilliant because their map looked really unprofessional because it was scrawled all over, but then you realise it was brilliant because it was a living document, and every time they saw something new they'd write it on there, and yeah, it was actually a really good lesson for us to learn. Aside from the maps too, we all tried to identify hazards, but once again you find you forget stuff. So our latest incident on farm here was we had a young staff member and her dog jumped off the quad bike, got the foot caught, so we got a lost time injury with a dog bite. Now all us old guys know that when your dog gets caught up in the fence or something, you whip your jacket off and wrap it around its head while you extract it. But we'd failed to identify that with the young staff member. So that's in the hazard register now. I had a handpiece incident, had a lock up down on the other farm down home, and that was just because I left incorrect gear sitting in the wool shed one day. It was an old handpiece and somebody picked it up and used it. So there's all these things where I say it's just going to be a living document because there's always new hazards you're going to find. You think you got it nailed, but you haven't.
What are some of the rules you've put in place around these hazards?
50% of this property is like tussock country, Richard, so we identified that those were track-only access and pretty strict on that, so they're coloured orange on the map. The other thing we identified is we had to be pretty good on our track maintenance, and we've actually been constructing some new tracks too, because you need access to that stuff. So if the rule's tracks only, well, we've got to give people access to it. Come off that tussock country, then we come down to sort of the broken country, and we've called that yellow, called it sort of high risk areas. So any time that like fert spreaders or bailage guys are coming in, they've got to touch base with Tim here before they access those paddocks. Predominantly there's just like drops or areas that if you weren't aware of what's over that ridge, you could just fall over. Yeah, so it's just touching base with them before they enter the property. I'm a pretty visual type guy. I find maps are brilliant. So if you've got a colour-coded map that you just hand to a guy, giving it to them, and then we can just talk through those high hazard areas, those yellow areas, the medium risk areas, but it's really easy when it's visual.
Andrew, let's get on to vehicles. What is your policy around vehicles, quad bikes, etc.?
Always want to provide the safest vehicle we can. So we've actually got a side-by-side here, Tim uses that, and the staff member here gets a quad bike. So new quad bikes, new side-by-sides, always keep them well, mate. We maintain them off farm, we take them off farm for servicing. The other thing is we keep pretty good kit here. We've got a reasonably new Massey Ferguson tractor, about 1800 hours, so it's quite good. Run duals on that. And even the old tractors here, we've actually put new tyres on them because Tim was out there on slippery conditions, so we put new tyres all around the Ford a couple of years ago.
So maintenance, you would agree that is a big part of health and safety?
Well, it is. I mean, you don't want to be running substandard gear, basically. And as I say, it all comes back to protecting these guys if they're out doing stuff for you. And also, I didn't want Tim slipping off the hill in this Ford tractor, so it was a bit of cost putting these tyres on, but just made it far safer.
Tell us about some of the new equipment you've bought in to assist.
Well, over the years here, the other thing we've specced up on is cattle crushers. You know, we're dealing with big animals there, and we wanted to make sure they can be safely restrained. So we bought 2 cattle crushers over the years, and those things don't come cheap, but the reality is that's just business as usual investment, and we don't think of that as health and safety, but that's the stuff you're just doing anyway.
Now, Andrew, you tell us about Tim being involved in this process. Tell us about one of the innovations he's come up with to help one of your staff members lift dead stock.
We had a young woman working with us here, and she wasn't a big girl, and she struggled with any dead stock that we had. So Tim got his quad bike trailer and mounted a winch on the front of it, and then even to the extent he put a roller on the back of the trailer so that this young woman could winch the stock onto the trailer. Wouldn't hurt, didn't no lifting, wouldn't hurt her back.
Now, Andrew, one of the organisations you're tied up with, Beef and Lamb, they've run health and safety workshops. Tell us about the response from farmers.
Yeah, response has been great, Richard. There was a lot of farmers worried about this. Using Southland as an example, because that's where I live. Initially we were going to run 5 down here. We ended up running 25 workshops down here, and that was just fantastic. And what we found too, we were getting couples coming along. And when you get the couples and the wives involved, you can start progressing this stuff.
So, Andrew, if you were to give advice to other farmers out there, what would it be for them to get started on their health and safety journey?
The journey we're on, we just started the process, and we attended like the Beef and Lamb workshops. We worked with the staff in their business, and I suppose the thing we're looking at is direction, not perfection. So even if we haven't got it right, we've started to think about the things that we think we should be thinking about. So it just gets you thinking about that small stuff on your farm. We all concentrate on the big stuff, the quads and the helmets, but there's a lot of small stuff that we've got to think about too. So just start the journey and just get going on it.
Thanks, Andrew. As we've seen, Andrew has commenced his health and safety journey and identified risks and how to manage them with both staff and contractors that come on farm.